noticeable lack of will to fight among some Ecomog troops, premised on ambiguous political objectives. This for me is very, very interesting. Groups question the legitimacy of foreign intervention to restore democracy when their nations were under military rule. It was a contradiction that while many of the countries trying to intervene in, particularly in Sierra Leone, were under military rule, they were trying to install democracy in Sierra Leone. So for some of the troops, it was a major contradiction for them why they should be asked to fight in a battle that they felt it was at that point unnecessary. You can in your country and try to reinstall democracy in another man's country. There is also the urgent need for Ecomog and by extension, all regional peacekeeping missions to adhere strictly to international humanitarian law, ethical standards, and clearly defined rules of engagement. Um, there were reports of all kinds of unethical conduct by some of the troops, and some of the generals that we spoke to highlighted some of them, which is sometimes it is typical during war times, but there is need to emphasize ethical standards and clearly defined rules of engagement so that the troops don't go outside their mandate. Military leadership must prioritize regular troop rotation, adequate rest, and welfare support to maintain high morale and operational effectiveness in prolonged engagement. There were some troops that remained in Liberia and Sierra Leone throughout the period. So the rotation, that rotation did not provide for adequate rest, affected their morale. So one lesson is that subsequently, we need to ensure that there is regular troop rotation. And of course, point number 10, Ecomog must prioritize accurate intelligence gathering and realistic assessment of adversary capabilities before and during operations. And we highlighted some of them. Majorly, we talked about um, sometimes when you are going to battle, you underrate the capacity of your opponent. Many of them relied on unconventional tactics, use of child soldiers and civilian shields to get at Ecomog. Armed forces must undergo continuous training and retraining in unconventional warfare and insurgency, reflecting the evolving nature of modern conflict. Even this morning, we had that conversation whether the army is trained for unconventional warfare and insurgency. And I quickly tied this to what General Gawan said when we presented the Historical Society of Nigeria presented its book 2 weeks ago. He said that if he is asked to come and join the army today, he is analog, and so he will not be able to do what the officers and men are doing today because of ICT. So he was not used to unconventional warfare. He was used to conventional warfare. So he didn't receive training as a military officer to embark. So armed forces must undergo continuous training because quite often even the insurgency we face in the country are so unconventional, and there is need for reorientation training to be able to reflect the evolving nature of modern conflict. The military must establish specialized post-traumatic disorder and counseling centers to support personnel deployed in peace enforcement and operations. In fact, some of it was an emotion-laden moment for some of us when some of the generals spoke and they cried. And some of them, when they came back, there was no post-traumatic disorder counseling. They just landed the airport and they moved back to their barracks without that counseling. It is very, very critical, very, very important. That haven't been in battle for years, haven't seen all what you have seen in battle. You come back and immediately you go home and continue. In fact, some of them talked about sleeping and just waking up at night in the scare of the moment, feeling that maybe they are still in war front. It is important to undergo PTD. And of course, Nigeria received no tangible benefits from its interventions And we said subsequent foreign interventions must be guided by a clear national interest strategy in today's competitive international system. When I teach my students, I talk about Father Christmas diplomacy. That when we were growing up, there used to be Father Christmas. I remember our parents would take us, and the Father Christmas will give us gifts. But in modern diplomacy, there is no Father Christmas. When you go to see Father Christmas, you pay money. Sometimes you pay Father Christmas 5,000, and then Father Christmas will give you a gift of 1,000. So Father Christmas has made 4,000 naira. So diplomacy, there's no further Christmas diplomacy. When you look at United States negotiating in Russia and Ukraine, they have their own vested interest. We can't spend so much money in Liberia and Sierra Leone. And after the war, we packed our bags and baggages and left and allowed the United States of America to come, their contractors to come and build Liberia and Sierra Leone. We must provide a platform for the Nigerian state and its citizens to benefit from such intervention. This is lacking or was lacking in Liberia and Sierra Leone. So we need to be more strategic. And of course, another major lesson is the importance of owning and telling our story. And I've made this point repeatedly. Ecomog's intervention through books, documentaries, films, television, and other media outlets. If we don't tell our story, nobody will know about it. And somebody, people talk about the hunter and the hunted. That is it when the hunter does not tell the story, or when the hunted does not tell the story? There's a story about hunter and the hunted. One telling the story, not telling the story. So we need to tell our story. It's very, very important. And I use this opportunity to call on the Nigerian Armed Forces to think through doing documentaries, film, television programs, and others to, highlight. For instance, the book that we wrote, commissioned by the Chief of Army Staff. I expect that by now participants are supposed to have read that book. I think it has well over 25 chapters. There is nothing about Liberia and Ecomog, Liberia, Sierra Leone, Ecomog, that has not been discussed in that book. The dimension of women, children, and so on and so forth have been well documented in that book. So it is important to make it available for people to know. In the military tradition, sometimes you say it is not yet time to declassify. So I wouldn't know whether it is time to declassify some of the activities that took place in Liberia and Sierra Leone. And so, conclusion, I said this paper affirms that despite daunting challenges, ECOMOG's intervention in Liberia and Sierra Leone restored peace and democratic governance, showcasing West Africa's resolve and capacity for homegrown solutions. The lessons learned offer valuable insights for strengthening future Africa-led peace operations and advancing regional stability and nation building. So thank you very much.
Presentation. Please let us applaud the guest speaker once more for this classic delivery. With the kind permission of the special guest of honor, I would like to request for 5 minutes leg stretch while we set up for the second phase, which is the interactive and discussion segment of this event. Thank you, sir. Can we be seated, please? You are welcome back, sir. The special guest of honor Distinguished invited guests, ladies and gentlemen, without wasting time, we shall go into the discussion interactive session. For this session, we have an elite panel who will discuss the paper just presented. But before I invite the members of the panel to the stage, please permit me to quickly introduce the moderator and the members of the panel to this audience. The session will be moderated by Major General E.G. Eneche. Major General Eneche John Eneche, retired, holds a Master of Science in Security and Strategic Studies from the University of Ibadan. With over 30 years' experience in the Nigerian Army, he has held numerous command and staff appointments. Notable among them are Commanding Officer Naibat 11, On Mill, Liberia, Managing Director, was Housing Development Limited, Commandant, Army War College, Nigeria, and Director, Defense Media Operations, Defense Headquarters. He was a member of directing staff at National Defense College and authored a publication on Nigerian Army strategy in the Northeast. Sir, you may please take your seat on the stage. Please welcome General E.G. Eneche on the stage with round of applause. Now to the members of the panel, beginning with Major General Godwin Umelu, retired. Major General Godwin Umelu holds Master of Science in Strategic Studies from University of Ibadan. He has also held several command and staff appointments while in the service, some of which include Commanding Officer, Nigerian Battalion 15, United Mission in Liberia, Commander 38 Artillery Brigade, Mongunu, Commander Sector South, United Nations African Mission in Darfur, Sudan, and General Officer Commanding 81 Division. He was a directing staff at Armed Forces Command and Staff College, Jaji, and National Defense College. He is a professional fellow, Emergency Crisis Disaster Safety Environment and Risk Management Institute. You may please proceed to take your seat on stage, sir. Next to come on stage is Major General Usman Abdulmumini Yusuf. Major General Usman Yusuf holds Masters of Science in International Affairs and Security Studies, as well as Security and Strategic Studies from Nigerian Defense Academy and Tanzania, respectively. He has held several staff and command appointments, some of which are Commanding Officer 130 Battalion, Ogoja, Commander Headquarters 27 Task Force, Chief of Staff, ECOWAS, General Officer Commanding 8th Division, and Director Policy and Plans, Defense Headquarters. He was a directing staff at Armed Forces Command and Staff College, Jaji, and currently the Commander Infantry Corps. Sir, you may please take your seat on the stage. Our third discussant is Major General Kayode Oladele Ogundele, retired. Major General Kayode Ogundele is a directing staff and subject expert at the Nigerian Army Resource Center. He holds master's degree in international affairs and diplomacy from Ahmadu Bello University Zaria, strategic studies from University of Ibadan, and strategic management and policy studies from Nigerian Defense Academy. With over 30 years military experience, he has held several command and staff appointments. Notable among them are directing staff in Armed Forces Command and Staff College, Jaji, Director Coordination in Armed Forces Command and Staff College, and Commander 21 Armored Brigade in Operation Zamal Lafia. He participated in Ecomog operations and UNAMSIL and Operation Safe Haven, among others. Please, sir, take your place on the stage. Last, but by no means the least among our discussants, is Major General Dangana Alu. Major General Dangana Alu holds a Master of Arts in International Affairs and Diplomacy. He has held numerous command, staff, and diplomatic appointments, notable which are Commanding Officer 313 Artillery Regiment Mina, Deputy Chief of Staff, Headquarters Nigerian Army Corps of Artillery, and Military Advisor Permanent Mission of Nigeria to United Nations. He participated in Ecomog operation in Liberia and was a member of directing staff at this prestigious college and Armed Forces Command and Staff College, Jaji. Major General Dangana is currently the Deputy Chief of Policy and Plans, Army at Army Headquarters Department of Policy and Plans. Please join me to welcome Major General Dangana Alu to the stage with a round of applause. Before I hand over to the moderator, may I respectfully request the guest speaker, Professor Patrick Ukase, to please join the discussants on the stage. The guest speaker, sir. At this point, I will hand over proceedings to the moderator. The moderator, sir.
The, the special guest of honor, sir, Major General God retired. Let me stand on existing protocols. Now, I am trusting God to help me to overcome one temptation, which I used to criticize as a commandant when I was here. Not to start talking about the lecture all over. And I began to wonder as it were then, are you coming to moderate or to give another lecture? So having said that, I will suggest and I will guide us to go straight into the discussion of this very, very high intellectual and fulfilling lecture. And as a guide for the discussants, you have 10 minutes, but I'm going to give you a warning when you have gone 8 minutes into your lecture, into your discussion. So for the first discussant, let me start from my left. Major General Lumelu, you have 10 minutes, but you are going to take 8 minutes to talk, and at the 8th minute, I will now give you a sign.
The moderator, sir, after saying God should help you, then you want to put me on the firing line. Oh, what an interesting topic. I said to myself when I went through this lecture that I wonder what I'm going to say as a discussant because the prof had said it all. At the time, I began to wonder whether I was a missionary either in Liberia or in Sierra Leone because he said it at it were. Be that at its may, and being guided not to go through repeating the lecture because there is no way you can talk about this topic without re-emphasizing some of the things the professor has said. We must understand first and foremost that Ecomog was a child of necessity. It was born in a haste. Many decisions were taken in a haste. There was no appropriate and adequate time for planning. So there were a lot of gaps in the policies and mandates that were exploited in the course of the operation. For example, the issue of adherence to the laws of armed conflict and international humanitarian law did not come out explicitly as a guide when the troops were being inducted into that battle. And the end result played out while the operation was going on. Let me just go straight to basic issues I want to talk about. Those are the issues of the challenges and maybe some of the lessons. One of the major challenge as somebody who took active part in the Ecomog operation was the extended line of communication, especially for those of us from Nigeria, which created a problem in terms of sustainability of the troops, sustenance of the troops. I could recall when they brought rice to us from Nigeria that was literally black. We have to boil hot water to wash the rice, dry it in the sun before we cook. Tomato was shipped from Nigeria. Before it got to Liberia, they were rotting. We had challenges of spare, especially fast-moving spare. As an artillery officer operating the shaker, we had challenges with shaker batteries. We couldn't get shaker batteries, and at the time, at the heat of the operation, shakers were grounded due to lack of batteries. We started looking for batteries here and there. To the extent of going to Exide. There's a company, Exide company in Ibadan, to source for shaker battery. The ones they brought couldn't work. We have to carry the old shaker batteries to Ibadan for them to remove the cells and fix new cells. And when they did that, it couldn't last. So this was the major challenge we had then in terms of this equipment. Secondly, the issue of terrain. We didn't do a comprehensive terrain analysis before being inducted into that operation. And that made us not to know the type of equipment and type of weapons to use, to bring. For example, when I was deployed in Lugin Town, my platoon was inside a swamp. I had no rain boot. I was wearing my combat boot right inside swamp. By the time I came out from the swamp, all my feet were white because for 1 week we were there. We couldn't come out because of the intensity of the operation. By the time we came out and removed our boot, you see your legs were just looking literally white. We were not prepared for that. If we had done a good analysis and understood the environment where we're going to work, maybe some of these shortcomings would have been averted. Now you have the problem of kits, uniforms. You see 10 Nigerian soldiers, they are wearing 10 different uniforms. And this made us vulnerable because you cannot identify who is a rebel and who is a friendly force. My coursemate, Major General Mia, was shot on the way during the capture of RI Era, the Robos International Airport, because they were moving to Ghana. He was moving to Ghana, took over as the FOO from Atagoba. And they saw the people in ragtag uniform moving on the road. They thought that they were part of Nigerian soldiers. They didn't know they were rebels. Only for them to pass, and then they opened fire at them. And the officer was shot and had to be evacuated back to Nigeria for 7 months. He was in Yaba. But today, the issue of uniform has been solved. It is not the way it used to be. Now, the problem of unfriendly attitude of the locals. They were uncooperative. My coursemate was shot along Somalia Drive, just between Smento and Red Light, during the advance of 20 Battalion, Sati, when we started advancing to clear Morovia. The people that shot him were inside the building. He saw some people within the farms. They thought they were farmers. They didn't know they were rebels. Only for them to pass. The next thing, they opened fire, and it was the leading platoon commander. They brought him down. And that was one of the challenges we had then, that is fighting in built-up area. Because we have done it as training, more or less theoretically. But in real time now, they didn't understand that they needed to clear from building to building as they advanced along that axis. And we lost people on that route. So there were so many things that happened during that operation just because of lack of adequate preparation and because of the hasty nature between which we are inducted. Now, looking at it at the global perspective, every country that took part in Ecomog had their own national interest. They had their own agenda. For example, Samedo was killed inside the Ecomog headquarters. He was arrested inside the Ecomog headquarters under the command of a Ghanaian force commander, Lieutenant General Aquino. The Ulimos came there and took him and killed him. That was what led to the change of command from Ghanaians to Nigeria. That was what led to Dogonyaro being brought in. Many countries that were there had their own interest. Openly, they are Ecomog, but underground, they are working for their own national interest. And that was why we asked ourselves the question. Yes, in Ecomog, we had a strategic objective as a country. We had a military objective as a country, but what was our strategic goal as a country? We achieved the military strategic objective, we achieved the national strategic objective, but we did not achieve any strategic goal. And that was what was brought out during the lecture. There are a lot of things I wanted to say, but
2 minutes.
let me just go through to the issue of lessons. I will just bring out about just two important lessons. One lesson is that that operation gave us the opportunity to test most of our weapons in Nigerian army, because there were a lot of equipment that were procured and they were dumped in the warehouses, in the stores, in the armories and magazines, and they were never used. For example, if not for Ecomog, we wouldn't have known the versatility of Shilka. Shilka was procured primarily as an air defense weapon, but we discovered that the secondary role as a ground support weapon is even more effective than using it as an air defense weapon. The Vickers was brought in, but they couldn't be used due to the terrain. The Scorpion played a very important role, and the Sage, Scorpion, Sage, and the VBL played active role in those operations. So some of these things were, if not for this operation, we wouldn't have known their use. They were then the 155 field howitzer 77 Bofors was equally put to its first use by Nigerian military in Ecomog, and that is why today we can use it in the northeast. The issue of understanding the terrain came up very, very important, and that is why before you go for any operation, do a thorough terrain analysis, and that is where the INT comes in and the engineers to do the IPB, that is intelligent preparation of the battle space. If we do it and come out with our analysis, it will help you to know both in terms of kitting, in terms of equipment, and every other instrument that you require for that operation for you to be able to function effectively. And maybe at the end of the day, some of these things I will jot down and submit due to lack of time, because I've written down a lot of things here. I just brought out one or two key issues to give other speakers some time to speak. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, General Umeru. That has been very, very instructive and educative, in addition to the lecture we have received. Now, over to General Yusuf.
Thank you, sir. The special guest of honor, sir, our distinguished guest speaker. I want to thank you for your paper. I remember this morning when I saw you, the first question I asked you was whether you served in any military unit. Haven't gone through the paper. But having extensively taken part in the research with the army, I understood your background. And also as a barrack boy, the military terminologies are known. The moderator, sir, the letter that was sent to me in Jaji stated that I have the permission to speak for 10 minutes or more. So stopping me at 10 minutes is infringing on my fundamental human rights. Sir, I want to thank the lecturer again for a well-delivered paper. I'm going to look at, I just want to make a little contribution to this audience from my deployment as the Chief of Staff of the ECOWAS Standby Force for 3.5 years. And also, I took part in the operation in Sierra Leone, where the special guest of honor at that time was our Deputy Force Commander. It is true that ECOWAS was established in 1975 as an economic union, started by Nigeria and Togo. But by the time the issues in Liberia came up, and Samuel Doe requested General Babangida's assistance, and he obliged, there was a lot of resistance. And one of the key issues was that as an economic union, we didn't have that leverage. There was no legal grounds for deployment of troops. And what was reverted to was that 1981 protocol for mutual assistance. There was still a lot of debate on it. So what happened? As soon as that was deployed, there was the pull between the Anglophone and the Francophone countries whether to participate or not. Well, it is not really an issue of the countries beside us, Togo, Cote d'Ivoire, on their own refusing. It was the French influence. They saw that Nigerian overriding factor that if we go in there, it was going to strengthen it. So they put pressure on these countries not to go along with Nigeria. And what Nigeria had to do was, okay, let's see how we can pull the other English-speaking countries into this mission. And luckily, Guinea, which is called Guinea-Conakry, and the French refer to them as the um, the rebellious child of the revolution. That's what France refers to Guinea, because even if you look at the setup in West Africa, Guinea is the only country that refuses to move with the other French-speaking countries. So it was easy to get Guinea in. And for us to get Ghana, which is the second biggest English-speaking country, we bribed them by giving them the first commander appointment. And until General Aquino decided to mess his career, and we took it over. And at that point, Ghana didn't have any moral justification to fight the cause, because till today, he's referred to in Ghana as Buffalo Soldier. They feel very embarrassed by the slaughtering of Samuel Doe under his command, and we took over. And what now happened was that as the operation moved on, there was the need to look at the legal instrument for ECOWAS to go into future peacekeeping operations within the region. And after that, what was signed was the 1993 revised ECOWAS treaty that looked at expanding the issue of mutual assistance, and also drew from the AU Consultative Act after the Rwandan genocide that we will not sit and watch when a disaster is happening. So you move from the principle of non-interference to the principle of non-difference. You must intervene to bring peace. And when that revised treaty was signed, it gave ECOWAS as a region the legal backing to be able to pull forces together. Now, from 93, 7 years in Liberia, 10 years in Sierra Leone, so many other protocols came up. And after that, you have the 1999 ECOWAS protocol relating to mechanism for conflict prevention, resolution, and peacekeeping. This was the protocol that gave ECOWAS that legal backing now to go into any peacekeeping operation and be able to deploy even without the host country's request. Remember, Liberia, though requested Babangida to come to say. So now ECOWAS can go into a country without a request if there is going to be a humanitarian disaster. Then the last of it is the protocol relating to democracy and good governance, which came up in 2001, and the supplementary protocol, which is one of the biggest issues right now in ECOWAS that has led to the withdrawal of Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso. Because with the issue of the coup in the three countries, this was the protocol that was recalled. That based on this protocol, which all nations are signatory to, you cannot change government unconstitutionally. I don't want to go into the other aspect of the high-handedness of ECOWAS that led to the three countries withdrawing. But these are the legal instruments that has given ECOWAS that backing to conduct peacekeeping and peace enforcement operation. And the high point of it was the deployment in the Gambia after Yaya Jammeh's election, and he didn't want to leave. ECOWAS was the first sub-regional body in the world that was able to deploy in a potential crisis area within 7 days, as against the 14 days that is stipulated by AU. And they went in, and as God will have it, nothing happened, because the Nigerian jets, fully loaded, were doing low pass over Yaya Jammeh's house, while the meeting with ECOWAS was on for him to peacefully leave power. And of course, with the mobilization of all the forces from all the countries he left. But going back to the lecture, there are some very important key takeaways in some of the tables the guest lecturer presented, you will see that Ghana had more forces on the ground than Guinea-Bissau. But for those that were on the ground, than Guinea-Conakry, sorry. But for those that were on the ground during the operation, Guinea-Conakry was more effective in terms of combat to the operation than Ghana.
Yes.
And this reinforces what Gerald Melo said about countries having their own idiosyncratic policies in the mission. Of course, once you call Guinea, Bombardier, they were using MBRLs. They will help you shatter the whole place. But what did we learn from them? When Guinea finished leveling the whole place, they will go there. At night, they will withdraw to their former position.
2 minutes more.
Okay, sir. You see, this is the fundamental human right talking about. So what we did to save the operation was that, okay, Guinea, when you finish bombarding, we'll go and hold the ground because they will pull out. Previously, by the time they pull out and were moving the following morning, attack from that position. But Guinea was very, very effective in terms of combat operations for the mission, which was very good for us. The Nigerian contribution to ECOWAS largely 32%, and today it has shifted. Nigeria is paying virtually 60% of ECOWAS fund. Some countries don't even pay at all. It is only when they are looking for the position of the presidency of ECOWAS that you see them struggling to pay 1 year, 2 years at that. A country is owing for 10 years that they've not paid. And lastly, let me just talk about the issue that the guest lecturer talked about in terms of we producing movie to showcase what we have done. It is a very interesting discourse, and I got modeled in this last year. General Farouk Yahya commissioned a team of filmmakers from Nigeria to shoot a film about the Northeast operation. And at the end of the day, it became an extortion exercise against the Nigerian army. When the film was produced, before it would be released, General Lagbaja took over as Chief of Army Staff. We previewed the film. Nigerian Army had paid his part funding for the production of the film. The producer was asking Nigerian Army for another 54 million for him to release that film. We called him, we sat with him, we reviewed the film. So many parts were badly acted to the extent that we even sought special permission from Army headquarters and allowed those portions to be reproduced here in Gas Brigade. At the end of the day, the man was still asking us for 50 million naira, and Army headquarters was pissed off. So if you look at this and compare to what is done in Hollywood, where they act a lot of film to showcase the American power, I do not think the Pentagon is extorted to that extent. So sometimes one want to do these things with good intention. The partners in progress were supposed to have shut down the entire process. And this is also a discourse that should be opened with the other side, not with the army. So that some of these films they make at the end of the day, they make their money from sales and not extortion from army headquarters. So that is what has shut down that project for now. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Well done. Over to General Gunele.
The special guest of honor, Major General S.P. Guad, retired, the Commandant, Army War College, Nigeria. Very senior officers from the Army, Navy, and the Air Force present here. Participants of Army War College, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Let me start by appreciating the guest lecturer for a well-researched and packaged lecture on Ecomog. I don't want to belabor us with some of the things he said, but I want to take a cue first from one of the challenges Major General Umelu pointed out about IPB. In American Civil War, diseases killed more soldiers than the bullets. Unhygienic condition. Medicine was not advanced. There was no anesthesia. brutal amputation. In conducting IPB, often we neglect issue of health. And I will give you one example from Ecomog operations. In eastern part of Sierra Leone, Lassa fever is endemic. We lost 7 soldiers. General Williams is here. He was the adjutant of the unit. I was a company commander. We lost 7 soldiers to Lassa fever without knowing. It got to a point we thought maybe because their trenches were facing the cemetery. We called the Reverend Father, we called the Protestants, we called the Imam, they all pray. We kept on losing soldiers. Until we discovered it was Lassa fever. And that area was endemic Lassa fever. When we are planning operations, all these things need to be put into. It's demoralizing when you see your soldiers falling sick and dying and you don't have solution to it. The first person was the staff sergeant to Beta. The last person before we now discover it was Lassa fever. And the locals never told us they had problems like that because all the health facilities in that general area had broken down. That's one point. Then in the lecture, we didn't lay more emphasis on the role of the international community. Why was the problems, the conflicts in Liberia prolonged and the one in Sierra Leone? Where were the arms coming from? We forgot the role of Libya in this matter. Fode Sanko, Charles Taylor, and some of the commanders were trained in Libya. Libya wanted a foothold in West Africa. And again, the issue of Nigeria perceived hegemonic tendency is all about power to control this West African sub-region. And Nigeria is seen as a threat in that order up to today. Up to today, France still want to prevent Nigeria from having hold of this territory, especially with most of the countries there are francophone country. So anytime we are considering all these issues of operations, we must factor all these things in. And again, my own contribution is when we do a paper like this, like the guest lecturer said, the special guest of honor said, those who forget history are doomed to repeat it. We need to do comparison with modern day security challenges we have and look at it. How have we moved forward? What have we done that is different from what we did in the past? First of all, let me look at it from the strategic level, national strategic level. When you look at the causes of the problems in Liberia and Sierra Leone, they are still present in most African countries, including Nigeria. They are developmental issues, poverty, illiteracy, importation of radical ideas, passive marginalization, unequal distribution of wealth. And when you look at the military strategic level, what are the same problems? Logistics, equipment, funding. They are still there. Those are the issues we are still grappling with, whether in the Northeast or in the Northwest. So when we deal with topic like this, we have to do another comparative analysis with current security challenges we have and be able to project future and tell ourselves the truth. Most of the problems we encounter in Ecomog, they are still there. They are still there. And it, like General Umelo rightly pointed out, we had equipment that time that we didn't even know the use. We knew the use anyway, but we didn't know the secondary use of those weapons. We could use it for this, apart from the instructions from the manufacturer. So the problems are still there, and that's the same problem we are facing in the Northeast. What we faced in Liberia, Sierra Leone, were insurgencies. The same we are facing in the Northeast with people's collaboration. And what have we learned? And sincerely, that was the period of the armed forces apogee, that we had equipment, we had so many things, naval ship, aircraft, compared to what we have today. But we thank God, because of the problem we have at home, a lot of equipment and platforms are being bought every day. But there are things we have to look at it. How did we fare in Sierra Leone? How are we faring today? Did we take charge of those challenges to overcome the present one? So in future paper like this, my own suggestion is, when somebody is putting out a paper like this, you look at the challenges, you look at what we have today currently going on, you do comparative analysis and offer some solution. Now, we have to look at the issues of the international community. Liberia was colonized by United States of America. Sierra Leone was colonized by Britain.
2 minutes more.
Yes, sir. I will soon round up. What roles did they play when the carnage was going on in these countries? They stood aloof. They stood aloof. And that's instructive to us that Africa problem will only be solved, and we must always prefer to look for solution to our problems. It was after Nigeria has played the role of cannon fodder, they now came in to claim the glory. And that's why it's important we write our stories before others write it for us and do some revisionism. Now, what is the best way forward? When people say Nigeria went to these countries, we came out like Father Christmas, we should tell ourselves the truth. We don't have capability like United Kingdom or USA to exploit the resources or gain something back from these countries. All what we have are business entities like Zenith Bank, Dangote, that could go and tell me one Nigerian company that could construct very good and acceptable road. Look at Dan Tatasao. They had to revoke most of the contract. And when Dan Tatasao even let contract from federal government, they sublet it to Julius Berger. So where's the money going? Do we have any mining company like South Africa that could go into Liberia or Sierra Leone to do mining when we are still battling to mine our own resources here? Please, we need to develop that capability before we, because when you are saying something, Nigeria didn't gain this, Nigeria did not get that, you have to look, do you have that capability to do that? Do you have that capability that US has to tell Ukraine, we are taking 50% of your rare earth materials? We don't. And again, it's morally wrong. The prestige Nigeria has today in West Africa is because of Ecomog. And if we now put this American attitude, arrogate ourselves, we are taking 50% of your resources in Sierra Leone, we are taking 50% of resources in Gambia, how would the citizens of those countries view Nigeria? That's my submission.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Over to General Alu.
Thank you very much, sir. The special guest of honor, Commandant Army War College, senior officers, ladies and gentlemen. Um, I was hoping that being the last person, I'll be given like an additional 3 or 4 minutes more. But then let me see how it goes. Thank you for the opportunity to be a discussant on this paper. I want to commend the author for tackling the subject of an enduring strategic importance, not just to West Africa, but also to the broader debates on regional security and African-led interventions. For me, history is teaching us a lesson, and we have to look at what is teaching us so that we don't go into the pitfalls of the past. As they say, history repeats itself. That's why I'll try to relate to this paper to current realities that we're facing today. The paper presents a well-structured historical account and offers critical insights into operational and diplomatic complexities of ECOWAS. Now, I strongly say diplomatic because what I see today is the armed forces doing things, and we are not, or the Ministry of Foreign Affairs doesn't carry along. So there's a disconnect between military diplomacy and the national diplomacy that is supposed to be there's supposed to be an interface in it. You all remember what they say about national elements of national power, diplomacy and military are there. So again, what intrigued me is the nuance of this understanding of peace enforcement in the region marked by overlapping national interests, fragile institutions, and economic dynamic. We have seen institutions make peace or keep peace. It's not just meant for only the military. What we had in Ecomog was the military going in to do a lot of things. And perhaps I would say that's why maybe Liberia wasn't really done well like Sierra Leone. And we had to come back to Liberia as Ecomil and then transform to OnMil. What that is showing to us today is the same thing that is happening in our northeast and northwest of this country. Everything seems to be left to the military and not knowing that organs and institutions of government all have to play a part. The whole of society has to play a part for us to get to where we want to go to. On the issue of mandates for the ECOWAS, you saw how difficult it was to do everything. It also reminds me of what happens in the UN. We talked about MINUSMA in Mali, and which ended without achieving anything. Why? The UN gave the MINUSMA a mandate to go and keep peace in Mali, but Mali was facing a terrorism problem. So how would you expect the force commander or whoever it was to carry out a peacekeeping mandate when terrorists were all over the place and he didn't have the capacity or the capability to fight the terrorists? So this is also something that the paper brought out to look at the mandate when you are sending troops into an operation. The issue of funding, resources of troops and money that is being sent in operation. I can say for certain that if it's not worse now than it was during ECOWAS, I think General Yusuf just pointed out that we pay 60% of the funding for ECOWAS. This is true, it's happening now. We have troops deployed in Guinea-Bissau, we have troops deployed in Gambia. Who pays them? Nigeria does. ECOWAS is not paying them. And I can tell you that I was in New York when Gambia went and made arrangements to deploy for UN operations with Bangladesh. Bangladesh was to give them equipment, and they were supposed to give men. So we're there, keeping our troops, paying our troops, and they are going out to go and make money with the UN. It costs a lot. Like I think it has been said, there's no Father Christmas this day. Um, Ecomog really exposed us after Liberia and Sierra Leone. We became known. I mean, the paper talks about how the whole world recognized us as peacekeepers. We went on to be like the fourth highest troop contributor in the UN. We had force commanders, we had sector commanders, we had so many things until we had a strategic blunder. And I call it strategic blunder because that is what it was. We took out all our troops from UN that we were fighting because of the fight in Nigeria. I understand. Look at Pakistan and India. Before the conflict started a few weeks ago, Pakistan had 29 divisions. I say again, 29 divisions on the border of India. 19 of those divisions were infantry. Now they have escalated it because of this tension. They have escalated it. So we have the capacity because the population of Pakistan and population of Nigeria is in the 200 millions. We had no business living peacekeeping. Let me go to what the paper says about some of my reflections about the paper. And before Ecomog, we didn't have proper training, like as you mentioned. But at least nowadays we see that we have the Martin Luther Aguirre International Leadership and Peacekeeping Center, which conducts all the trainings for peacekeeping before people are deployed. And I think that is a plus to us because it has added. Right now we are training. We are about to commence the training of the troops going to Gambia. One thing caught my attention when the coup started happening in West Africa. Was it that, although General Yusuf made mention of the protocol, but was it that behind their backs, the African leaders of the ECOWAS leaders of the various other countries where coup are not taken, were afraid? Did they think that if we let this thing continue, it's possible that it will reach us? And so we quickly sanctioned those three countries, like General Yusuf said, based on that protocol. But now they have cut away. And again, if you look at that with the complex security situation in the G5, in the Sahel, let's say, is that not a problem for us? For Nigeria, it is. Now we are not relating with Niger the way we should. We have 1,500 kilometers of border that affects us because of some protocol. I mean, can't we look at ways of getting over this? I would also want to talk about African African problems should be given African solutions. Currently, last year, Ghana spearheaded the adoption of Resolution 2719 by the UN. And the Resolution 2719 simply says that African peacekeeping in Africa will be left to African Union. The UN is going to provide 75% funding, and the African Union will provide 25% funding. This is an opportunity where I see for us to key into it. But already, because Ghana is the one that sponsored this resolution, they're already making steps. So I think this is where we need to come up again and key back into peacekeeping as a nation. Because of course, I was shocked when we attended the peacekeeping forum in the United States mission in New York. And Ghana, one of the officials from the foreign ministry in Ghana was talking, and he was reminding us that they were key players of the Ecomog. And that day, I almost I was in I almost fainted. I didn't have time because it was shocking, and it goes back to what we're saying. If you do not tell your story, nobody's going to tell your story for you. People have taken the glory. The British claimed the glory for Sierra Leone. The US claimed the glory for Liberia. So what did we do? Did we just go there and sacrifice resources, sacrifice our troops, and we have nothing to say about it? Let me see. So allow me to finally say a couple of things.
2 minutes more.
Sir?
2 minutes more.
Okay, sir. So now I just want to talk about the lessons as we have noted. Timely intelligence was one of the things that was discussed in the paper. Up till now, it's still an issue for us. We must prioritize accurate and timely intelligence with a holistic assessment of our adversaries. I think this is something that we are trying to do again with the Northwest. Like was mentioned, we went into Liberia. You pass people, you don't know that they were rebels, and at the end of the day, they attack you. It's still one of those things that we're trying to do, trying to find out exactly what is that our adversary of. I want to talk about the concept, or yes, the moral component of fighting power, because in the paper I talked about the will to fight. Sometimes we as a nation, we must get to understand and make our troops understand why do we need to fight. It's a very important component. If we do not get that, we would keep having the issues of troops not willing to fight. That's one thing that is also there too. Finally, on post-traumatic stress disorder, right now when troops come back from battle, I know that there's something that they do in Judge. I think the commander, corps commander infantry will be able to even say something on that. They take them through a process. What I'm not sure is the measurement of success of that process, but they are being inducted, they are being spoken to, they are being talked to, so that we don't just leave them to go back into society as brash as they came. So I just wanted to add that to what is happening on PTDX for troops in the Nigerian Army. Thank you very much.
Thank you, General Alu. Having listened to the perspectives from the discussants, I will now move to the audience. I think we'll take from the students participants first, then we can now come to the front row. And we have just about 40 minutes for that now. I don't know how we are going to manage it, but yes. When you stand up, you introduce yourself. A participant? Is he a participant?
No.
In Mufti? No, wait, participants first. Students first. Good. Stand up, introduce yourself. Sharp, no more than 3 minutes.
I am Lieutenant Colonel Thomas K. Nimle. I'm for the Liberian participant. I just want to extend my thanks to the guest lecturer and the panelists for the educational insights on Ecomog. So my question comes from Ecomog entered Liberia August 1990, and they were there up to they were there until 1997 elections. And after 2 years, Liberia relapsed into a civil conflict, leading to Nigeria intervening through Ecomog. And later it was actually transformed to United Nations Mission in Liberia. And the credit for peace in Liberia is credited to the United Nations. My question is, what was the strategic goals of Nigeria in Ecomog participation? Was it for sustainable peace, or was it for the execution of ECOWAS mandate, given the fact that one of the mandate was disarmament and demobilization, which was not done, was not finalized? Thank you, sir.
Okay. We'll take another one. Yes. No, you. Yeah, yes.
I am Little Army participant. So my question is, ECOWAS mission in the Gambia was, ECOWAS mandate in the Gambia was to install democracy and that is to restore democracy and to install the presidency. And from 2016 to date, I believe that mandate has been achieved. But I want to know, what are the primary security threats that justified presence of ECOWAS in the Gambia up to present? So,
Okay. Let's take one more. One more.
I am Colonel Bello, Nigerian Army participant. So, peacekeeping or peace enforcement sometimes goes hand in hand with, let me say, diplomacy or political agreement. So, I want to find out whether is there any political diplomacy alongside with the Ecomog intervention in Liberia. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Hold on. Now we'll address the speaker. Take your question again, the last participant.
Okay, sir. So I said peacekeeping or peace enforcement sometimes goes hand in hand with diplomacy or political
You respond to any of them?
Yeah, I think I can talk to that of Gambia.
Okay. Over to you. General Mello is going to address the issue of Gambia, the question about Gambia.
I can talk about that of Gambia because at one time I was director of peacekeeping at Army Headquarters, Department of Training and Operations. The continuous stay of ECOWAS troops in Gambia is that the instance of the Gambian government. You should understand that even staying there is capital intensive. And there was a time we mooted pulling out, but the president requested that ECOWAS should extend their stay. Only him understands why he still wants ECOWAS to stay. But the ECOWAS had to oblige him his request by continuing to stay. Anytime he's satisfied and he wants us to pull out, I'm sure ECOWAS will not hesitate to pull out from Gambia. But as pertains to a particular security threat, there is none but ECOWAS is still there at the instance of Gambian government. Thank you.
Okay. General Yusuf.
Yes, thank you, sir. Okay. General Melo has just hit the nail on the head. But I want to ask you a question because I wrote a paper in 2020 for the withdrawal of ECOWAS troops from the Gambia, and we had a drawdown program to pull out. In fact, we had started implementation. Ghana was to pull out from Barra. After Ghana pulls out, Nigeria have pull out from Banjul, then the Senegalese will pull out. But the problem with the Gambia started from even how the government was installed. The president was resident in Senegal, and from there, he was brought in by the Senegalese forces to come and assume his mandate. And the Senegalese used that opportunity to capture the presidency. And that is why the security officer around the president is a Senegalese. And one other thing they have also done in the Gambia to extend their stay in the Gambia beyond ECOWAS mandate is also the occupation of Canalai. And I'm sure they are still there till now. And as Chief of Staff ECOWAS standby force, it was almost a fight for me to get into Canalai because the Senegalese were telling me I cannot go there. And the CDS of Gambia couldn't override that decision. So these are the politics that is played from outside that is affecting the takeover of the security architecture of Gambia by the Gambian security forces. The other aspect of it is also the alliances that the different political parties have gone into. The president came into power with the alliance of the opposition parties, and he signed an agreement that he will rule for one term and leave. And the leader of the opposition would take over as the new president of Gambia. When he started enjoying all the largesse of the presidency, he said he was not leaving again. And for him to remain, to go into alliance with the remnants of Yaya Jammeh that were still in the country. And in his cabinet, 7 key Yaya Jammehs his cabinet. And he needed that to stabilize his government. And because of that, and with the support of Senegal, what now happened was that Ecomog now became a regime protection force because the opposition were now going to work against him. And that is what has happened till now.
1997 election, and then Ecomog, because actually Nigeria was actually involved in Ecomog coming back, and then it was turned over to UNMIL, and then the credit for peace was given to UNMIL. So my question is, what was the strategic goal of Nigeria participation in Ecomog? Because was it for sustainable peace, or was it only for the implementation of Ecomog mandate?
Good, sit down.
Okay, thank you very much. I mentioned a couple of things. When Nigeria first went there as ECOMOG, it was basically military. The peacekeeping turned to peace enforcement, and they fought throughout till they went into Sierra Leone. So things like disarmament, de-radicalization, and all those things were not done, as you said, true. But elections were conducted. Charles Taylor came into power, and it was expected that he had gathered a little support from all the other warring factions, but nobody knew what Charles Taylor was going to do. And once he started doing, the factions all broke out, and that's why Liberia relapsed again. But when Liberia relapsed, it was the troops that were in Sierra Leone, Nigerian troops, that came in, 2 battalions that came in as Ecomog, took Freetown, went towards the port, blocked everywhere, and that was when we were able to remove Charles Taylor, if you remember. That we removed Charles Taylor. And after stabilizing Liberia, that was when the UN came. But even in the UN, who had the highest number of battalions? Nigeria. So even when you say the UN, the UNMIL stabilized Liberia, who did they use? The people who know the ground. We had been fighting there for over 10 years. So we knew the ground better than any other person. Yes, our strategic goal was to restore a government in Liberia, which was achieved when Charles Taylor became president through an election. So that was a strategic goal. Perhaps you're still not convinced.
Okay,
Maybe I'll
I
leave it
think
to the professor.
Prof. Akase will add.
Okay, let me just all protocols observed. You know, if you listen to my lecture, I talked about the mandate of Ecomog, Ecomog 1 and Ecomog 2. The mandate for Ecomog in Liberia was to restore peace. And once peace was restored by Ecomog, the mandate of Ecomog was achieved. You know, so what have Ecomog was not supposed to remain in Liberia and sustain peace in perpetuity. There was a mandate. Ecomog went there, and that mandate was achieved. If you notice in Syria alone, what was the mandate? The mandate was to restore democracy and bring back Tijan Kaba. There also the mandate was achieved. If you are looking at the issues that happened the post installment of peace, that one was an entirely different ball game completely. But what were the mandates? The mandates were there and they were achieved. I don't
Hope
know I
is,
answer your question.
I hope it's clear to you now. One stage was the first mandate, and after that, what happens after that was to be handled. So two separate things, but all towards Ogundele contributes.
You see, there's something with military force in any conflict. The military force can restore law and order. Do you understand? But it's left for the people to coexist. If you bring, like when I was in Jos, if you bring 2 divisions of soldiers to Jos, if the people there are not ready to live in peace, you just be running at scatter. It was the Liberians themselves. Maybe you didn't read the situation well, that decided we need to live in peace. And that's why you have peace. If the people refuse to accept to live in peace, you continue to put boots on the ground, there will always be problems. The moment you reduce the number of the soldiers, even after saturating them in the country, there will always be that problem. But your people, do you understand, decided to live in peace. What we did, we facilitated that peace by helping you with democratic institutions. But on your own, you have to decide whether you want to live in peace. If you decide tomorrow you want to continue that hostility, maybe one small thing will still trigger that thing up. Do you understand? That's the concept of law and order. And you have to understand the concept of peaceful coexistence. If myself and my neighbor decide to live in peace, we'll live in peace. But if we have trouble, police will come in. We see the presence of police we present because we know if we start any something, they will arrest us. But the moment the police men leave, we continue our strife. Please, let's look at it from that position. You understand? And let's encourage our people. When we are saying this, we are senior officers. No matter what, the military cannot give you peace. They can always give you that environment, maintaining law and order, so that you people will now sit down that we want to live in peace. Thank you.
So participants, I think from what you have listened to, particularly the issue of this Liberia, is that there must be diplomacy, non-kinetic and kinetic put together before you can, think of what you are talking about. Now, not the last, if we manage the time as he permits us. But the last person that has the person that the colonel, what's your name? Take it again. I thought there were going to be so many hands up, but now that we have few of you, it's better we give it time. Okay.
Sir, I'm Colonel Emebelo, Nigerian Army participant. So I said sometime peacekeeping and peace enforcement goes hand in hand with political negotiation, that is diplomacy. So in that regard, I want to find out whether is there any political negotiation that is non-kinetic approach, as you said, alongside with Ecomog intervention in Liberia. Thank you, sir.
Okay. In Ecomog.
In Ecomog, not kinetic and kinetic. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. But to
So somebody's address the where address respond.
Lome Accord, all those ones.
There were negotiations. I know, I'm quite aware of the Lome Accord. We also had the Akosombo, I think Akosombo is in Ghana.
In Ghana, yeah.
Akosombo Accord, where the various factions were brought in, and then discussions were held, and agreements were made. But the issue was, some of them went back and reneged on that agreement. For example, you had the MPFL, you had the Ulimo, and at the end of the day, after the agreement was signed, Ulimo broke into two. You had Ulimo J, you had Ulimo K. One Ulimo will tell you they are not partner, so the agreement is not binding on them. You have to understand that in peacekeeping, the main thrust of peacekeeping is negotiation and mediation. And that is why it's always said that in peacekeeping, the consent of the parties are always sought. And that is when you can negotiate, and that is when you can mediate. It is only when negotiation and mediation fails, that is when you go into peace enforcement. Thank you.
Excuse me, sir. Let me just. I had a point here that I couldn't cover in my own.
You can cover it now.
Yes. You see, what I've discovered over years about this negotiation when it involves all these rebel groups. When they are under military pressure, they negotiate. And what they do at the end of the day, they use that period to regroup, do more recruitment, refit, and rehab. And they will start again. That's where they will now cause one spark somewhere. They use that one. And meanwhile, on our own side, our troops, because of negotiation, we always keep looking forward. We'll soon end this thing. We want to go back to our family. We relax. It happened in Liberia. When from peacekeeping, Ecomog transit to peace enforcement under Gerard Dogoyaro. And all the rebel groups were pushed out of Morovia into the hinterlands, and they were being pursued. They now went for Yamoussoukro Accord. MPF Chancellor even allowed Ecomog troops to be stationed in his headquarters in Banga. But when more arms came in from Libya and they've extended our line of communication, they launched Operation Octopus in 1992. Cut off our soldiers, take hostages and everything. We had to reintroduce peace enforcement again. The same thing happened in Sierra Leone, the Lome Accord. They brought Odessa Accord from Nigeria because it was being kept in custody in Nigeria. With the negotiation, everything they brought it in. He was going about campaigning. Meanwhile, under his second in command, Issa Sisi, were doing retraining in Kalau. Before UN, it was UN then, before UN could realize, they were always almost marching on Freetown again. That was what led to his arrest, imprisoned, and trial, and eventually died. So we should always have and tell our political masters, when you are doing this kind of negotiation, still maintain that military pressure. Because if you now say, okay, we have a dividing line, okay, go to Daru, go to Shegbema, they are just drawing you in for them to refit, regroup, and relaunch the attack. Please, let's advise the political masters over this. It's just going to, because every negotiation must be backed with military force. It's very important. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Let's come to the line behind the front seat. Any okay, good.
So I am Brigadier General A.M. Diko, member of faculty. So mine is not really a question, but rather a contribution, and mostly it goes to the participants. But I believe all of us can benefit from something I just realized. Sir Engineer Omelo's contribution, he spoke about how the entire Ecomog arrangement was a child of necessity and was done in sort of a haste. And what I realized was that it is possible that that culture of kicking off military operations in a kind of haste is part of us, and we need to do something to address it. Now, I'll give an example with the declaration of state emergency in the Northeast that ignited Operation Boyona. I was a major in Army headquarters, and what I expected was that Nigerian Army would either deploy battalions or brigades, but we generated troops from AHQ garrison. It's a kind of strike force. Now, those decisions, in my opinion, kept snowballing, that we were, instead of generating troops from our organic order that we knew, we're always creating troops to create new units to insert to replace those ones or reinforce those ones that we have already deployed into the theater. And at the end of the day, when we try to induct the organic infantry or armor artillery units, we no longer have them in the barracks because all the troops have been generated and inducted as ad hoc units. So I believe this is an opportunity for us to observe these kind of lessons and note them for our future operations. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Professor Okwe.
Thank you very much. Professor Okwe is here in representative capacity. He's representing the Nigerian Army Research Center, where he currently serves as senior research fellow. I'd like to make one or two comments with respect to the paper presented by Professor Okasi. The first comment would be the necessity for documentation. Obaro Ikime, in his last book, Does History Really Matter?, made a very profound statement. He said, you either write yourself into history or you are written out of history. The Nigerian Army, Nigerian military's contribution with respect to ECOWAS was easily written out when UN came because we failed to document. Until that volume was written, commissioned by the former Chief of Army Staff, there was nothing that we had that we could lay our hands on. In documenting the history of the activities of the Army that we emphasize, we are not just doing it because we are professional historians. We are doing it because it is part of the Army's heritage, it's part of the Army's tradition, it's part of the Army's institutional memory. The Army has a number of research centers that can easily anchor some of these things. But most times, operations like that are abandoned. It took over 30 years to have an authoritative document on Nigeria's participation in Ecomog operation in Liberia and Sierra Leone. Judging from that experience, another work was commissioned, again, by a former Army Chief of Staff, to look at Nigerian Army operations in the Northeast within a particular period. Before this time, there was nothing like that in print.
What you had were restricted documents, which was only circulated among military officers. The army is not telling its own story enough. And this is a major problem. Even in the operations in the Northeast, your stories are not known by Nigerians. Politicians who sit in the National Assembly and say they voted so much money to the military because of operations for security and all that, but they don't know what is happening in this place. We need to pay more attention on this very critical aspect of the military as an institution. The military today has, the army today has Nigerian Army Military Institute. We have the Nigerian Army Heritage and Future Centers. What is happening in those places? These are supposed to be critical heritage, Nigerian Army Heritage institutions. But nothing fundamental is happening there. The second point I want to make, and this I will do very quickly. No foreign policy is conducted on the basis of charity. Look at the history of the world globally. There is no country that will go and conduct its foreign policy either by way of intervention or whatever, on charity basis. We went into Liberia and Sierra Leone with so much resources, material, human, and otherwise. We came out of that place, we had nothing to show for it. The point I'm emphasizing here is that forget, you are a big brother, forget, you did very well, you performed wonderfully. What can you get out of that? This is very, very important. Scholars have argued there is no foreign policy that is done on the basis of charity. We are not saying go and exploit Liberia because you establish peace. Go and exploit Sierra Leone because you establish peace. What we are emphasizing here is that until you situate your national interests very closely when you engage in peace operations in such a way that you are not losing entirely, you are actually going to lose. We lost in men, we lost in resources. Today, Nigeria is glorified as big brother. How big is this brother as a factor in our foreign policy? We need to begin to rethink this. And it's a subject matter of debate at forums. Until we begin to look at this very closely, we may just lose out. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prof. I think
Somebody.
I'm trying to. Okay.
Thank you, sir. Air Commodore A.A. Balogun retired.
Okay.
I must commend the effort of the guest lecturer, especially giving us those data on the operations both in Liberia and Sierra Leone. But I want to just contribute to those major operations that the guest lecturer mentioned. And I'll start with the Bukana axis because yes, it's always an army-led operation, but then army must be supported. And we went into Ecomog as a joint force where the Navy, the Army, and the Air Force operated as a team, and we all had roles to play. So I'll just talk about some of the rules so that we can learn from them and then apply to what we are doing currently. Because Army alone cannot do it. The Air Force cannot win the war alone, neither would the Navy. But when we are combined and we work as a team, then we can succeed more. Now, in Bukana, we had the Navy that first blocked the waterways, and then the Air Force came in, and then the Army was able to occupy Bukana. But the Navy was the first that enforced the blockade so that those merchant ships could not come in. That was in Liberia. Now you talk about the one in Sierra Leone when we advanced to capture Freetown, from Jui to Kuso, all the way through the cities. But that job was not done by the army alone, because the first day of the advance, the Air Force was there providing air cover. And we followed the army combat air patrol all the way through Kishi Road, through the Freetown streets, until we captured Freetown when we attacked the Parliament building. But the attack did not just come easily. The Navy was at the coastline enforcing the blockade. Yes, they were told not to use their shells because they have heavy weapons on the ship. And the Air Force was to support the army, and we worked with them closely. And the last movement was from the cotton tree climbing up to the State House and the Parliament building. I will say this particularly because we need to understand that each service has its strengths and limitations. On that final day, the army, because we were working together, we had air to ground integration, proper integration, and we were communicating. While the army was to climb the hill to capture the Parliament building at the State House, they wanted air support to strike at the place, at the Parliament building. But not knowing that Air Force was also having challenges because the rebels have set fire onto the whole Freetown everywhere. So there was smoke. And this smoke prevented the Air Force planes from going in quickly. But after a lot of cycling and observing, they were able to go in. And when the Air Force guy dropped that arsenal that day, the army was able to move in. And because there was communication, the army started reporting, yes, we have the Parliament building. Next minute, we have the State House. It was so nice, because it was a team effort and we succeeded. The second one I would like to point out is the advance of a brigade that was moving from Rugberi Junction, traveling to Koto, and they had air cover. And the air cover arrived overhead and said, okay, continue your movement. I will provide a constant Reiki patrol of the highway. And they were going, and somewhere along the line, the Air Force guys saw an ambush point mounted by the rebels and told the brigade. I think the brigade was led by General Ari Additional, retired late. And he told them, stop where you are because there's an ambush point ahead of you. And the Air Force guy started and attacked the ambush point before clearing the army to move ahead. And I think that advance took us like 7 days and we did not lose anybody. Now, the lesson there is, why is it today that we are entering ambush here and there? We are losing soldiers here and there. And then the final one I will talk about was this rescue of some troops in Kenema. These troops in Kenema were of the Archie Regiment, and they had been holding the town for a very long time. But under pressure, they had to withdraw. And when they withdrew, they went into the bush, and nobody knew where they were. But along the line, because the Air Force still has radio with those guys, we were able to locate them, and then we were able to airlift them, after abandoning their location and went into the forest. The Air Force was able to use helicopters escorted by the Alpha Jet and airlifted them into Liberia. There were about 167 of them, and we did not lose a soul. Today, can the Air Force still do that for the Army and go and search and rescue whoever is stranded anywhere? I think those lessons that we learned there, which were benefits of proper joint operation, we should bring back here and then utilize them. At a point, the Air Force in Liberia had to attach a Super Puma to Operation Sandstorm. And that was what Berakobe was using for tactical mobility from battle to battle. I think those lessons should be replicated today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. I think let's be very brief because we have to come to now.
The special guest of honor, sir, distinguished senior officers here present. I am Brigadier General I am Lafal, the Deputy Director, Joint and Combined Operations at the Defense Headquarters. I want to most respectfully just make a contribution to two things that based on this topic. I want to appreciate Ecomog Balogun. I was part of the brigades that advanced to that Makeni that you talked about, commanded by General Ari Additional. Having said this, the member faculty, Brigadier Diko, talked about units that are organic and they have cohesion and inducted into battle, vis-a-vis the task force battalions that we're having today and their successes measured in the field. I'm trying to link what was done in Ecomog to what's happening today. Having said this, in Ecomog, number 23, 19 battalion, number 24, 6 battalion, number 25, like that, all true. We started having task force units in Ecomog from number 28. 1D form a task force unit commanded by Colonel Masonuka. Number 29, 2D form a task force unit commanded by Colonel Mofobi. Number 30, 3D form a unit commanded by Colonel Bawa. Number 31, 82D commanded by Colonel Ngwaba. We started having that matter of task force, and these units I mentioned in the mission, the cohesion was not there, and they suffered a lot of strategy. 24 Task Force Brigade was captured in Makeni, commanded by General Alfred Ilogo. The units under that brigade were all task force units. And that is the same thing we're repeating. Now, having said this, linking it to what we are supposed to be doing today, how did we succeed in Sierra Leone and Liberia, and we are not succeeding here? The threat dimension were similar, the way General Umelo rightly captured, but they were not actually the same because the operating environment are not equally the same. In Sierra Leone, there was no social media. Today, we have social media. In Sierra Leone, actions of economic forces were not put under public scrutiny by civil society organizations, Human Rights Watch, and others. Here, we have that. Nigerian media today will report 11 Nigerian soldiers massacred by Boko Haram. And then this capture say dozens of soldiers slaughtered. Media, Nigerian media. In Sierra Leone, we never had such things reported against the Ecomog. So the problem we are having here today, as against all what we had in Ecomog then, is population control. It's purely population control. And the population continually become receptive to the terrorists that successes of the military are never reported anywhere. Whatever we do today in Nigeria is never reported. Even when we call the press, sir, you are director of media operation, and what you made to call the press to beg them, you grant intent interviews, you are elated. Go and publish this. The press will never do it, both print and electronic. But when terrorists just enter Buhari, Abuja under siege, terrorists have taken over Abuja. That is how you hear the publication. So I just wanted to mention this, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much for that observation. I can tell you that the war in the media is sometimes more than the war you fight in the field. Thank you. I experienced it live. So we come to the front row now. Come. Just have about 10 minutes more.
Media is not seeking for what is the reason. You see, the problem is that most of the medias
they will tell lies now. Most of them will even tell lies. They will tell lies.
The special guest of honor, guests, lecturer, members of the panel, senior officers, ladies and gentlemen. I am Major General FS Team, the Commandant, Nigerian Army School of Infantry. And I'll just say something on training. I think it's instructive. I am yet to hear that throughout the Ecomog experience, we had a training base or a mechanism for training and reshaping our troops while in theater. With all the avalanche of troops that are coming in from different locations, from different units, we couldn't harness them into. And if you put that side by side with what operates today, before troops are sent to the Northeast, we have in-barrack training, then pre-deployment training, then in-theater training. And we still had all these problems. We are still having these problems. And then there was nothing like that. So going forward, I think it is very important that for every theater that is created, whether here or outside, we have an outfit that can reshape the minds and conduct of our troops training-wise. Secondly, we've talked about documenting our history. It starts from the individual, the commander, the soldier. You cannot be a leader if you are not a reader. An officer must have a diary. You must have a mechanism for preserving facts. If not, I wonder if our veterans would have been able to write a book today. There's no how everything will remain. Oga Balogun here, I read one of his books on Ecomog, and so many of us, we must develop that habit of documenting primarily issues and events. And that is why in the unit, as a commander, you have you in distribution, you have file, you have personal file, commander's file, and all those things. So that at the end of the day, you will be able to extract some of this. I think I just feel I should mention it to the participants. Then lastly on PTSD, and I am one of those saddled with the responsibility of training or receiving our troops from the Northeast. And I can say for the induction training. And what we do, just to give an insight, is to try to give them both a moral and spiritual rehabilitation. Additional to that, the issue of psychological re-evaluation before they go back to their families. And it has been very useful. We will bring in psychologists, trained psychologists, forensic psychologists, to sit down with them. I tell you, it has been very instructive. Through that, we have been able to recommend a whole lot of them. Rather than going back to the unit at the end of their training, we send some of them to 44, and we recommend some of them. We have some of them who are pure suicide issues waiting to happen. And it is from there we identify and we take steps to put them in the right box. And going forward, I just feel I should make that clarification. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much. At this juncture, I will request the guest speaker. Okay, sorry. Go ahead. Agbo.
The special guest of honor, the guest speaker, and members of the panel, participants, gentlemen. I am Major General O.J. Akpo, the Dean Faculty of Heritage, Nigerian Army Heritage and Future Center. And I was privileged to serve 3 times in Liberia and 2 times in Sierra Leone. The topic, very interesting. A lot of gains and lessons that have been reeled out from our intervention in Liberia and Sierra Leone. And flipping through the lecture, I was able to see that the guest lecturer captured some phases of operations during the Ecomog operation, and I'm very happy with Commodore Balogun that really mentioned specific operations that were conducted. And as a college, I don't know how much time they have for this package. I don't know how much time they have for this package. If they had all the time, what this package should be about, to my mind, should be actually interrogating these specific operations as phases of war. Interrogating these specific operations, advanced operations, deliberate attack on locations. Those are the things that this course at the operational level should be interrogating the campaigns that were involved. What were the preparations that were put in place? What equipment were concentrated? What forces were mobilized? Who were the commanders? Who were the actors? And what was done right and what was done wrong? So that we can better learn the lessons that were involved in the specific operations that took place. Regarding writing our stories, I am from the Nigerian Army Heritage and Future Center. We know when that center was established. And we cannot be talking about the heritage of the Nigerian Army without talking about the heritage of the operational heritage of the Nigerian Army. So we are putting things in perspective. Very soon, we'll be visiting major players We will come up with concept notes, operations, and all that. Those who participated in them, for them to tell their own stories. We capture them, we document them, and just like what we see on National Geographic, on History Channel, where we watch a lot of operations that are taking place, First World War, Second World War, and all that. We will build all that in, and it is something we have started interrogating. Then the question was asked, why would UN take credit for our intervention, particularly the second intervention in Liberia? I was the operation officer of the Vanguard Force that had to land in Liberia, and it behoved on Nigeria, so to speak, to bear the cat when the peace accord was signed in Accra. And the officer from Liberia asked what was our strategic goal. I would say that our strategic goal is nothing other than sustainable peace in the sub-region. Because other than that, even we that took part in the stabilizing the situation before UN came in, before Ecomog came in, Ecomog, we didn't even earn a medal. They didn't give us medal for the 3 months we were there before UN came in. That is how much we appreciated ourselves. So I will tell you that there's no other goal, no other objective other than let there be peace in the sub-region, because we didn't go there with any mind to gain any other thing from that operation. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, when we finish, I'll let you know. Now, the discussants, you have 1 minute each to conclude what you didn't conclude. And then after that, our guest speaker from Ali, 1 minute.
Okay. In rounding up, I just wanted to bring this. I know it will generate a lot of thoughts and things in this hall now. I said something about Nigeria playing out of peacekeeping, making a strategic blunder, and this is why I said so. These Nigerian armed forces could have been giving this country over $100 million by being in peacekeeping. If we had stayed in peacekeeping, we would have been making over $100 million every year. Now, this is being done by some countries. I made mention of why Ghana wasn't interested in Ecomog experience, because Ghana, as currently as 2024, makes over $50 million by just being a part of peacekeeping. Rwanda, which is like the third or fourth highest peacekeeping country, makes over 100 million. Now, the painful aspect of this is that Nigeria is the highest paying country in Africa. Last year, before the president attended the UN General Assembly, Nigeria had to pay almost $17 million to the UN. At the end of the day, we found out that we were making about $4 million. Rwanda gives the UN $99,000 and makes over 100 million. So food for thought. Do we really leave peacekeeping, or do we stay there, or do we find a way to go back? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Gentlemen, when I was talking about the 1993 reversed protocol, I skipped a portion of it deliberately. One key aspect of that protocol is that no 2 countries in West Africa will go to war. It was part of the discourse. And that was why the present president of Sierra Leone, when he was coming to power, one of his key campaign points was that he will regain the territory that Guinea is holding since the Ecomog days. when they were pulling out their forces from that part, from their border with Guinea to fight, they told the Guinean armed forces to help them hold the place. And after they occupied it, Guinea thought there was natural resources there and they have refused to pull out. So with support of China, he has armed and ready to go to war. By the time they came for their meeting in Abuja, and all the head of governments went into closure, when they came out, we saw the two of them laughing and hugging. That's one of the key protocols and one of the success story of ECOWAS in terms of all these peacekeeping efforts and maintaining peace in our region. Then the last thing I will say is that in all this discourse, have we asked ourselves, why was it possible for other ranks to take over power in these countries? It goes back to what the Commandant Nasi was saying. It has to do with training. I'll speak specifically for Sierra Leone. The Benguma training camp trains everybody together. Everybody. On the day of POP, Mr. A, B, C, D, F are commissioned. The other ones are other ranks, and they are still cosmates. So it was easy for other ranks. They will look at officers sometimes, this are my cosmates. And they were all moving about with sidearms and everything. So one of the key things after Ecomog was the security sector review in that country. And that was why Nigeria deployed extensively in Liberia and Sierra Leone, so that we can retrain the army and reshape the training institutions so that there can be these different lines of operation. And that is what we have seen till date. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Melo.
Thank you. I think my last word would be, as stress evolve, commanders at all levels must be forward-looking. Therefore, training must be dynamic and purpose-driven. In essence, in peacetime, train for future war. Currently, we are on the fourth generation warfare, which is asymmetric war. There is already the fifth generation. So we don't have to wait for the fifth generation to meet us before we start training for it. So the time to train and prepare for the fifth generation warfare is now, so that we don't make the mistake we have made in the past. Then finally, African problem, African solution. I will just give an example with Liberia. This time around, post Ecomog, that is during the UN. I was commanding officer, about 15 on mail. In the deployment of the FPU, that is the Formed Police Unit, the Nigerian Formed Police Unit was deployed in Banga. The Bangladesh, the Indians, and the Pakistan. When there was a protest, a very serious protest in Morovia by the locals, the Bangladesh and the Indian FPUs ran back to that. They couldn't contain the situation. It became so bad that they had to ask the Nigerian FPU to come from Manga. And when the troops came from Manga, what did they do? Bulala. Bulala and Kane. They whipped the people out of the street. They didn't fire any gun. They didn't use tear gas. Just Bulala. Once they said, Ecomog men here again, Ecomog men here again, everybody entered this room. And that was it. When they wanted to ask Nigeria to leave because of our poor ORI, that's during the operational readiness inspection, and they say not up to 50% of our equipment were serviceable because all our APCs were tracked instead of wheeled, and they say we are going to go. The UN staff said if they want Nigeria to leave, before Nigeria should leave, they should allow them to leave Liberia first. So even with our poor equipment in the UN, the international community didn't want us to leave, because their confidence in staying in Liberia was because Nigerian troops were there. So at times we don't value ourselves, we don't value our capacity and capabilities. People know our worth, but at times they don't want to say it so that they don't boost our ego. Thank you.
Thank you, Gundele.
Thank you very much.
Take over.
I will take a cue. The last point General Umelu raised. The ECOMOG model has been model for other sub-regional bodies. It was after ECOMOG that other regional bodies like SADC, that's South Africa Development Commission in Southern Africa, felt it necessary to copy that model, and they used it in DR Congo and Mozambique. In East Africa, you have Intergovernment Authority on Development, IGAD, that they deployed in Somalia, though their intervention was short because they did not have that resilience that Ecomog, led by Nigerian soldiers, have. No matter what they call us, we Nigerians, we have something that is resilience and ability to survive under difficult situations. Most nations don't have that. I remember when we were at Manu Junction, somebody came one day and he saw the conditions as soldiers were deployed. He said it's only Nigeria in Ecomog that will allow his troops to be deployed in this place. Now, Economic Community of Central African States, they too deployed in Central African Republic. At the end of the day, no success. So the Nigeria model, Nigeria-led Ecomog, has been its model, which other sub-regional body copy, and we should be very proud of that. Finally, we have one problem in all our operations, both in Ecomog and at home. We always underrate our enemy at the beginning. We have words like ragtag, riffraffs, unorganized, criminals. During Operation Onslaught, when they were to launch Onslaughts, the troops very close to Mano River kept on reporting that Burkinabes, mercenaries from Burkinabes are joining RUF. Liberian members of NPFL, Chancellors, are joining RUF, coming in to fight. They say, what are you doing? They ask for ammunition. What do you need ammunition for? How many are they? Will finish them. Ragtag. The same thing in Northeast. Joint Uru and Boyuna. Riffraffs, ragtag. I was chief of staff. I said, look, these people are not. These are resilient, faith-based insurgents, terrorists. Russia, USSR, how powerful it was, could not contain the Mujahideen in Afghanistan. America spent 20 years in Afghanistan. What do they come out with? The same Taliban. We should be proud of ourselves, what we did in Liberia. God bless Federal Republic of Nigeria. God bless Nigeria.
For the contributors. So finally, on this from this side, our guest lecturer to before we now.
Well, once again, thank you so much. All protocols observed. My concluding comments will be in one or two areas. You notice after the war in Liberia and Sierra Leone, I don't know whether we have developed a framework for strengthening Ecomog. I don't know whether it is when we have another challenge that will quickly mobilize Ecomog again. I would expect that there is a framework, a solid framework for Ecomog activities. I also want to speak to a second challenge. One or two speakers have talked about it, that we have lost two countries. ECOWAS has lost two countries, three countries to coup. When I was making my presentation, I talked about having military government at that point in time and trying to reinstall democracy elsewhere. Okay, now we have democracy in most parts of Africa. We have lost three countries. What are we doing to reinstall democracies in those places? Is it that we have taken it that it's a fait accompli? There's nothing we can do because ECOWAS has really been silent on the issue in these countries. The third point I also want to note is with respect to what General Balogun said. If you read that work that we did for the Chief of Army Staff, there is a chapter on collaboration in the army, in the armed forces. In fact, where the role of the Nigerian Air Force and the Navy, was well documented. And that book did not underscore that role at all. And I need to make that point. And he talked about leveraging that in our war in the Northeast. Generally, you will also notice that lessons that were learned in Liberia from the conversations here are already being utilized in Nigeria. We may not have utilized all of them, but obviously from the comments that I have listened to, it is obvious that we're already putting them into use. We can only do better from some of those lessons learned. Finally, the General talked about the media. And this morning, we're talking about a country, institutions in the country doing better than the country itself. We have a media that is challenged. Ownership. The type of media we have is a media that wants to report those headlines that will sell. And because of that, and due to lack of nationalism, quite often they go overboard. They are not interested in those stories that matter. And even yesterday, somebody was talking about the type of headlines our newspapers want to make. And General Nencha said he has, in fact, he was laughing and said, see, he went through a whole lot. Even with some of the orientation that we give to the media, but we will not stop. We'll have to keep trying. Because when these headlines go out in a global environment, it is not just within Nigeria that we read those stories. As they are doing the newspaper headlines, just like we do for the international papers, people elsewhere also read the headlines. And then quite often it is discouraging that you have people in the front line that are helping the nation. Quite often when they do the, all those positive efforts, they are not reported. The ones that are reported are the negative ones. And then sometimes I have read on social media where you see the army reporting that we have been able to neutralize. They will say, where are the pictures? When it comes to this one, they didn't bring pictures. All kinds of negative. And I will quickly and finally tie that to the issue of documentation because General Yusuf also was talking about the challenge the army faced in trying to document or do some documentaries. And it is closely tied to the point I made. In a country where, unfortunately, and I'm really sorry to use it, a whole lot of people want to become scammers, the rich get rich quick syndrome, the Yahoo Yahoo mentality. Quite often we need to be careful with the type of people we engage in trying to do some of these things. There are professional groups. For instance, I am not trying to blow our trumpet, but the Historical Society of Nigeria has remained a major player in the documentation of our activities in Nigeria and so on and so forth. So when we want to engage in this type of storytelling, history writing, and documentation, the type of groups and institutions that we relate with that can help us do this thing is very, very, very critical. So on a final note, I think for me, I have taken a lot of notes. Have learned so much from the little that I know, from the comments that the discussants, the panelists were making, and I can assure you that next time what I presented today will come out even better. Thank you very much.
On this note, hello. On this note, I will, before I hand over to the commandant to wrap it up, okay, yes, for the MC, I will say that from me, know yesterday, understand today, and plan for the future. Thank you.
esteemed special guest of honor, our very wonderful team of panelists, distinguished senior officers, ladies and gentlemen. Even though a vote of thanks has been slated for this occasion, I can't but start by thanking the guest lecturer for a very wonderful lecture and the panelists for their so wonderful contribution. I also want to thank everybody that has also contributed and has added the very rich perspective to this lecture. Thank you so much, sir. We really appreciate you. This is part of the effort in documenting our own part of the story, and that is what the college is doing. We can't do everything in one day, but we want to, in snippets, get aspects of our own history for people to analyze and document, and so that we can also tell our own story. Incidentally, when I was here as the deputy commandant, I went with the commandant to UK, the Joint Command and Staff College, or the Defense Academy. Part of what we wanted was, we wanted to see how they document things and do, we can share materials in their own library. When we went there, we were very surprised to see that they have far more materials on our own civil war than we have. Incidentally, it was in the same book when we were reading, we saw a book on Ecomog. We saw the Britons and the Americans taking responsibility and credit for everything they have done. Incidentally, I think the commandant was in one of the operations that they were taking credit for. He was saying, what? This is something I took part in, and things are not. I also want to reiterate that in further, with what the Liberian officer talked about, the reality is that there's no way these people can take responsibility. I recall very well NIBAT 1 and 2, and I think General Alu came as one of the NIBATs later on, Ecomil, which transmuted to OMI. Even as at the time they transmuted, no nation could take any operation, could hold any AOR, except if Nigerians are deployed. The Swedish, the Americans, Nigeria had to deploy to guard Mamba Point for them. And there's no logistics that moves except if Nigeria escorts them. So I think we did very well in that operation. I want to start by this popular saying that history always repeats itself, but we never learn. So I want to ask, are we learning? That is the thrust of what I want to see. Starting from the strategic underpinning to all our crises. Look at what happens in Liberia. It's about managing diversity that led to the crisis. Sierra Leone, the same issue of resource and poorly managed political system. There are things happening to us, but are we looking ahead? But for our participants, note that as operational level planners and future leaders, these are things that you have to strategically analyze, because the strategic underpinning to conflicts is what gives you the liberty to get the right solutions, operational solutions to any crisis. At certain points, you'll be advising the political masters, and you'll be also taking contingency actions for that. The next issue I want to also look at, notwithstanding what everybody has said, whether we went in for regime survival perspective or for personal interest perspective, in my own opinion, I think drawing from what has been happening and from history itself, look at what is happening in our own region. Does regional crisis not exacerbate national issues? With the benefit of hindsight, I want to borrow from one guest lecturer that came here. We as Nigerians, if we knew what we knew now, would you have ever allowed the intervention in Libya to take place so that Libya would break up? who is bearing the brunt? No doubt we are the ones bearing the brunt, and that is what is happening in the Sahel. And looking at the issue of Liberia and Sierra Leone, they are within our own region. If we allow the situation in Mali, Niger, Burkina, and whatever to go out of place, to definitely have an effect on us. Perhaps that was the thinking at that time also. And that is why we're also studying leadership within complex environment and the choices we make as leaders, whether to react in certain way or not to react. Because what we are actually teaching our participants here is basically military decision making. And it's so complex and it's not easy, and it doesn't have a linear perspective to it. There are always the backbends. So look at it also that we have also learned some lessons, and perhaps those things were also done to prevent certain things. We all know that in the security management of national security, for every untold incidents that happen, note that maybe like 80 to 99% have been blocked by certain proactive actions taken by the security forces. So perhaps the issue of Liberia and Sierra Leone were also within that realm. I also want our participants to note that these operations are actually a classic example of joint operations. And at the operational level, because joint operations are inherently, all operational level are inherently joint. And it gives us lessons, which I also want to pick from what General Akwa said. It has also challenged us to also go back and think and go back and draw trade models where we can look at lessons on even our landing, our opposed landing in Morovia. It was successful. When people talk about Normandy, we also have something to present. The blockades we have done have been one of the most successful in the world. When you look at contemporary history, that our naval forces, the role of the Air Force was also clearly brought out. And the role of our own commanders to retake back lost territory. If we document them, we'll have something for posterity. And this is one of the first steps that we need to do here. And I want to also state that, and it's also a question, did our operational efforts lead to good, positive strategic outcomes? From my own small analysis, I will say yes, which was actually better than other operations. For instance, during the Vietnam, where certain tactical activities did not lead to operational activity, did not lead to strategic success. Afghanistan. But I think we also have something to actually put for it. Telling our stories is actually something that we also do. Context and times matters, which is an issue that we also want our participants to know. That in those times where we had breaches of international law and other things that were actually the norm of the day, and we didn't have any law against it. Now times matters, and it's an issue that we should also look at in our own operations. Still, while we have made efforts to learn certain lessons, but one of the biggest lessons, I think we have actually not learned it. During those times, we are sustaining our own troops, be it with rotten yam and other things, but it remains that we had a system where we had operational logistics support at that time. Funny enough, as of now, many decades after the operation, we are still sending commanders money to feed the troops and distracting them from the main missions as an army. By now, we should have, if we want to, would have perfected that system of logistics. And that we want to charge our logisticians. And then when we come to our operational logistics package, we should look at it more clearly so that commanders can face on their main jobs rather than focusing on what you will feed and how much will remain inside. And I think somebody said it locally during the conference that at the end of the day, if he focuses more on logistics, Boko Haram is the last on his priority list. And exactly that is what is happening. That means we didn't even draw a lesson from Ecomog where we are actually sustaining our own troops. The battalion commanders had their rations. Ecomil came, we still had the same thing. Omil came, we still had the same thing. So on that note, I want to thank everybody most sincerely, and I want to say very categorically that the objective of bringing this seminar had actually been achieved because we were able to draw out very good lessons and provided the necessary guidelines for uh, our leadership development aspect and the operational planning aspect of the course. That is the military decision making aspect for people to draw lessons for them. Thank you, everybody, and God bless.
Thank you very much, sir, to our moderator and the panelists for treating us to very productive and educationally stimulating discussion session today. We say thank you very much, and please may we appreciate our moderator and the members of the panel once again. The special guest of honor, sir, invited guests, ladies and gentlemen, we count it a rare privilege to have a personality such as Major General Gua today in our midst. It will therefore be most rewarding for us to hear his thoughts on this very important topic. May I therefore have the honor to respectfully invite the special guest of honor to make his comments. The guest of honor, sir.
The commandant, the guest lecturer, the distinguished panelists, participants. I know the day is fast spent, so I wouldn't want to keep you here any longer than is necessary. I really want to thank the presenter, who I just realized that he's not only a barrack boy, but that his father was one of my officers, though a field captain then, but I think he was a warrant officer at that time. So I didn't know the young have grown, and he has really grown. So let's applaud him. Yes. Captain Ignatius Ukase is his father. I hope he's still alive, of blessed memory. He actually forced me into getting the first loan, 40,000 naira housing loan. I rejected it, but he forced me. He literally dragged me into becoming a debtor. I think it was a good one. I had the first house. I had the first house. Well, I just have one or two remarks to make. The first is the one brought up by my commandant, the corps commandant, corps commandant, right? Corps commander. Yes, on certain issues that were not why Ecomog went into Liberia. There are some conflicting reasons, but it has been established quite right that it was some kind of bilateral agreement between General Babangida and Samardo initially. That was why Babangida could co-opt two of his friends in Uganda and Tanzania to be part of it. But when it became an Ecomog affair, the Uganda and the Tanzanian forces melted away. Nobody heard about them again. That was when Babangida became the chairman of ECOWAS, co-opted other members of ECOWAS into it in order to get the legitimacy of using the sixth schedule of the UN Charter. And that was basically peacekeeping. And as far as he got co-opted into the ECOWAS, the Article 6 or 6th schedule, they quickly sought for the upgrading to the 7th schedule, which is the peace enforcement. So as soon as that was done, then they reverted back to peacekeeping. So that was the process that was done. I just thought I should add some more clarification to that. The participant from Liberia, I believe I understand where you are coming from. You know, he has a burden for the labor of Ecomog in Liberia. What is it for the Nigerian troops that took part in Ecomog, for Nigeria as a country? Indeed, it's a burden I have had also. Like earlier on, I made mention of my appointment to be force commander to deploy into Mano River commissioned countries, that's Liberia, Guinea, and Sierra Leone, which I didn't get to deploy because of some political reasons. But in the course of my preparation, I asked the ambassador that was coordinating the whole operation on behalf of our head of state. I asked him what was government thinking about our deployment there. Any mission, is there anything they want that will enable me incorporate it into my operations? Well, I wasn't being diplomatic about it. They should tell me if Nigerian government had any plans. He told me there was, in clear terms, he said there was none, that there was no need, since Nigerians have dominated the whole market in West Africa with goods. But those were individual marketing, and that Nigeria as a country had no plans. So I understand what is there for us. The plan was that we should strengthen the police force that will maintain law and order in Liberia. The military police tried, but they were stifled out, especially when peace was restored. It was then the British had interest in coming to take over the retraining of the military. That was why the military could not even have a headway in retraining the Liberian National Army. The little they could give us was the appointment of the CDS, in which we had two. We let Chief of Army Staff and General Abdurrahman. Unfortunately, they had to pay the supreme sacrifice for sticking in there. All those of you who know General Yusuf came in sick, and he couldn't pull over, couldn't pull through it until he passed on. Abdurrahman did not come back. He went on medical treatment in America, and only his body was brought back. Well, that's a topic for another day. But that was the much we could get. but they didn't have the free hand of retraining the military of Liberia. So you are right in your question. Were we there for peacekeeping or for some other things? I hope I'm right in their thinking. Yes. Well, coming back to the dean, actually you made a point about the major operations in Liberia. For the caliber of people that are training now, that should have been the level of into the real interrogation into specific battles. And let me use the opportunity to correct the presenter about the Battle of Operation Hard Knock. Operation Hard Knock was when 2 battalions were cut off in Tokmambok. Tokmambok is highland. And the teaching we have is that you normally occupy the commanding egg. And number 17 and number 20 were cut off. The routes leading to Tokmambok were cut off. So they were running out fast on supplies, food, and ammunition. The only supply was by air, chartered helicopter that broke down. So about a week, we had no supplies. The troops were getting agitated. Actually had planned that everybody would find his way out. Since the COs were there, jittery what their own fate would be. So the then force commander instructed the Ecomog ECB, the Ecomog Ground Task Force, to break through to relieve them of the pressure. And then in order to have some supplies to them, the Ecomog Composite Brigade was heavily artillery and 1 battalion infantry. Well, Commandant, I hope you pardon me because this is on artillery. Artillery by deployment, they are always in the rear, giving cover to the foot soldiers. Then Colonel Mofama, being the brigade commander, had this very difficult task of going on the ground to break through, to link up with the 2 battalions trapped there. And he was excited. So excited that the first thing he did was to go for his map case, slung it on, his compass, carried a scene camera at that time, they could video things, and a still camera. His thinking was that he wanted to capture the activity live. So the brigade commander led the advance. He was with the point section. And in less than 3 kilometers, they were ambushed. He got hit on the chest, but he was lucky. It didn't penetrate to the heart or the lungs. So he was evacuated. You're right, they lost 7 soldiers. I was the colonel coordinator in the Ecomog headquarters. By default, the contingent commander, because the contingent commander was the force chief of staff. So he was always in the headquarters. Now the force commander said he needed somebody to go and take over. And I was the lucky one he picked up to go for what I call the Battle of Tokmambok. So I ended up with that operation. I took 3 days, rescheduled the whole plan, then gave instructions or orders, and we commenced the advance, which we were successful. We broke through the barrier, linked up. Unfortunately, the artillery did it again. The 105 regiment that gave us that, launched us into Top Mambo, got carried away with the success and decided to trail the rear unit into Top Mambo. He wanted to be part of the success in Top Mambo instead of waiting for the second target that we gave him, that there was a route that was expected that the rebels would charge through that side. So we wanted him to pound that place. He left them there and followed the last tail of the advance. Unfortunately, as he got into Tegmambek, he was cut off. There was no security, no protection. So that became another setback for us. The whole guns, the 4 guns were captured, but somehow we were able to get them. So that Battle of Topmambak Operation Hardknock, I conducted it. I completed it, and that was when I knew that the troops were ready that night to find their way. But as soon as we were there, everything was stabilized. I just thought I should mention that. Some particular aspect of those that really contributed. I believe that's page, no, sorry, well, 27, I think. What did I say about that? Yes, you talked of the artillery, the air force, and everything, but the critical aspect that wasn't mentioned was the communication. Surprised if there are no signalers here. Communication was very, very important. There were no handsets at that time. The signal component commander, persons of late General Orubofa, I'm sure most of you know him. He did a very, very wonderful job in covering the whole of Sierra Leone with repeater stations of the Motorola. And that was what we used in communication. Though as crude as it was, there was no secrecy, but it was useful. Though we had the procedure, the rules of communication which were breached, and the rebels knew the code words to use for them. Operation, they called them Desert Fox, and we called ourselves nice name, Fine Boy, and everything. So in one of the parleys we had, their complaint was that how could Ecomog be using bad names for them in their radio? That they're calling them Desert Fox, Desert Fox. Why can't they call them fine names like we call ourselves Fine Boy? So we realized everything was, it wasn't safe, but then it works. We did a very good job. That was the first communication network that covered the whole country. And I think we should really acknowledge them and the efforts that communication, the signalers did a very good job. Apart from the 921, I believe, that communicated with the Army headquarters. Well, having said that, I think, like I said, I don't have to keep you here longer than expected. I must admit that it has been a wonderful, refreshing session, trying to think of those good old days when the men were men. One thing I would have to reiterate once more, is that the world is indeed, it's a global village. Talk much more or less of Ecomog. In the course of our sojourn in Ecomog, I had the task of enumerating the likely excess baggages that will be left in Sierra Leone, in Liberia. As at that time, we had 3,000 deposits of Ecomog children. 3,000. And though the greatest, it's not just Nigeria. We had Ghanaians, we have Guineans. So, but the good news is that we're talking of what is left for us as Ecomog. That in no distant time, we might probably have a president coming out that has a Nigerian or Ghanaian background in Liberia and Guinea. Well, that's on the lighter mood. I want to very seriously thank the commandant for deeming it right to invite me to refresh, to go through the memory lanes of our service in trying to be our brother's keeper. The flaws have been mentioned, and I hope we will take to heart the lessons learned. It's very unfortunate that all the operations within these years, there wasn't a provision for lessons learned. But I think that there's a provision now that will document areas of strength in such operations, areas of weaknesses, and where we can work to improve next operations. Once more, I want to thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to be the guest of honor to these wonderful people. So, do I have your permission now to declare that the seminar on Ecomog and regional security lessons from peace enforcement and conflict resolution in Liberia and Sierra Leone is now formally declared closed. I thank you very much.
Shall we please once again appreciate the special guest of honor with another round of applause? Thank you very much, sir. At this point, permit me to request the Commandant, Army War College Nigeria, to make presentations to our guest speaker, the moderator, and the discussants. The Commandant, sir. First is Major General Dangana Alu. source. So we have development areas, not only on military history and other things, but also to study local theories. And that's why at the beginning we had somebody quoting Usman Danfodio. We have Alatis and Wolf, we are going to Shaka Jibulu and so many other people. Yes. Good Nigerians and other regional. Next is Major General Kayode Ogundele, retired. Next is Major General U.A. Yusuf. Now to Major General Godwin Umelu, retired, sir. The next recipient is our esteemed moderator, Major General Eneche John Eneche, retired. At this point, may I respectfully invite the special guest of honor to please do us a favor, making presentation to the guest speaker, the special guest of honor, sir. Before the special guest of honor returns to his seat, the commandant will also want to appreciate him. The commandant, sir. Thank you very much, sir. The special guest of honor, sir, invited guests, ladies and gentlemen. This event has been successful in all sense of the word. In the words of Whitehead, an English philosopher, no one who achieves success does so without help of others. The wise acknowledge this help with gratitude. It is on this note that I will respectfully invite the Deputy Commandant, Director of Studies, Brigadier General O.I. Odige, to give the vote of thanks on behalf of the college to our distinguished guest, the Deputy Commandant, sir.
The special guest of honor, Major General SP Goa retired, our esteemed guest speaker, Professor Okase, the Commander, Infantry Corps, the Corps Commander, Infantry, representatives of principal staff officers from Army headquarters, our chief host, the Commandant, Army War College, Nigeria, our esteemed former Commandant, Army War College, Nigeria, Commandants of military institutions, establishments and formations, and commandants of Nigerian Army schools here present, senior officers, both serving and retired, directors and members of faculty and other staff of the college, participants of Army War College Course 9 2025, other esteemed guests, members of the press, ladies and gentlemen. It is with immense gratitude and a profound sense of duty that I stand before you this afternoon to deliver this vote of thanks on behalf of the Commandant, Army War College, Nigeria. Today has been a momentous occasion as we come together to reflect on and critically examine Nigeria's vital participation in the Economic Community of West Africa States Monitoring Group operations in Sierra Leone and Liberia. This seminar has not only enriched our understanding of those landmark missions, but also underscored the value of revisiting our military and diplomatic history to draw relevant lessons for our contemporary strategic landscape. First and foremost, I extend our most profound appreciation to our distinguished guests drawn from the academia, the military hierarchy, and other security agencies. Your presence and contributions have added extraordinary depth and richness to today's discourse, reflecting commitment to truth, scholarship, and national development. To our guest speaker and discussants, thank you for sharing your insights, research, and in many cases, your personal experiences from the fields of Sierra Leone and Liberia. You have helped illuminate both the triumphs and challenges of those operations, reminding us of the sacrifices made, the complexities of multinational engagements, and the enduring principles of peace enforcement and stabilization in volatile regions. This seminar has reinforced the significance of documenting our history, not just for academic posterity, but for shaping national consciousness and preparing our institutions for further contingencies. History is not merely a record of the past, but a tool for strategic learning and forward planning. Nigeria's experience in the Economic Community of West African States Monetary Group
is a compelling case study in leadership, regional diplomacy, coalition warfare, and the intricacies of post conflict reconstruction. We also recognize the critical role that civil military collaboration plays in conflict resolution and peace building. Today's interactions among stakeholders from various spheres underscore the necessity of inclusive dialogue in national and regional security planning. To the Commandant of the Army War College Nigeria, thank you, sir, for providing the platform for this seminar and your continued commitment to intellectual development. Your vision continues to position the college as a beacon for strategic thought and operational excellence. To our organizing committee and support staff, your meticulous planning and dedication ensured the seamless execution of this event. We are grateful for your tireless efforts behind the scenes. Finally, to our participants, I urge you to carry forward the insights gained today. Let these conversations inspire your research, inform your analysis, and sharpen your perspectives as future leaders and guardians of peace and security. In closing, let us not allow the lessons of Liberia and Sierra Leone to fade into distant memory. Let them continue to shape our doctrine, policy, and partnerships as we navigate the evolving regional and global security landscape. Once again, thank you all for your presence and participation. I wish you safe journeys back to your destinations and continued success in your respective endeavors. Thank you, and God bless you all.
Thank you, sir. Those words of appreciation by the Deputy Commandant, Director of Studies, officially marks the end of proceedings in this hall. However, with the kind permission of the special guest of honor, I have an announcement to make. Please note that there is lunch at the college lounge for the invited guests, while participant lunch will be served at the participants' quarters. Thank you once again for sharing your time with us. We're extremely glad to have had you with us and sincerely hope the seminar met your expectation. I remain yours, Group Captain Area here. Thank you and God bless. Okay, before we officially close the event, the guest speaker would like to make some presentation to the college. The guest speaker, sir.
This is George the Best in the Prize, published into a book by Ted Fund, and I would like to present that one to Professor Okpe. Maybe, Professor Okpe, please, could you come and help me do this presentation? And then the third one is on military leadership, service, and national development. First brief uniform, Ibrahim, edited by me and him. Also here for presentation. So I hand you them back. On behalf of the guest speaker, who by providence is my student, actually is my first PhD. I've been a professor for 15 years now. I'd like to make this presentation on his behalf and to tell you that I'm not only proud of him, but I'm also proud of the good work you are doing here.
Thank you very much, sir. Yes. Appreciate. Thank you. 10 copies each if you are selling them for the college library. So please, if you can also send them.
Would you let me go along that. The special guest of honor, sir, with this we have come to the end of the event. Good afternoon and do have a safe trip back to your various destinations. Thank you very much, sir.